Coming up today, South Korea confirms that a controversial US missile defense system will be deployed to the south to protect the country against North Korea's growing ballistic missile threats. Meeting all 129 ruling party lawmakers for lunch at the top office, President Park Geun-hye is expected to ask them to come together to support her administration's economic reforms. Plus, a monster Category 5 typhoon slams into Taiwan with sustained winds of over 240 kilometers an hour. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 8th of July. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We are going to start with a decision that will undoubtedly have massive security implications throughout the region. South Korea and the United States have confirmed that the US missile defense system known as Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, will be deployed to the Korean peninsula. The decision follows months of negotiations between the two allies. Now, THAAD is designed to take down incoming North Korean missiles, but its deployment is bound to spark controversy, especially as China and Russia are deeply against it. For more, we connect live to our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin, who's standing by for us at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. Hyun-bin, this is huge news.
That's right, Mark. South Korea's defense ministry announced within the last hour that Seoul and Washington plan to deploy the THAAD missile defense system to better counter North Korea's weapons systems. Now, let's hear what the defense ministry has to say.
To protect our citizens and U.S. forces in Korea from North Korea's WMD and ballistic missile, the two allies have decided to deploy THAAD to the Korean peninsula.
Ministry officials added that the allies are still searching for a location, with consideration for area residents and the U.S. forces in South Korea. The ministry says that the goal is to deploy THAAD to the Korean peninsula before the end of 2017. A joint working group has been working on that since February. And now that the decision to bring THAAD here has been finalized, the group will focus all of its attention on finding a suitable location. The ministry says that it is in the final stages of making the decision and will make an announcement within a couple weeks at the latest. Now, experts have suggested either Chilgok in Gyeongsang-buk-do province, as it could cover U.S. bases in Daegu and most of the South Korean peninsula, or Pyeongtaek in Gyeonggi-do province. Now, China has reiterated its opposition to the deployment and urged the U.S. and South Korea to put an end to its plans, in a nod to Beijing and Moscow's concern about THAAD's powerful radar system. The ministry says that that is purely for defense purposes to better counter North Korea's provocations. And that's all I have for now. I'll bring more updates in the later newscast.
Thank you, Hyun-bin, for that report on the THAAD deployment to South Korea. We'll be hearing more about that over the course of the day, no doubt. Now, there's been mixed international reaction to the latest US sanctions on North Korea's human rights abuses. As you'd imagine, North Korea is furious, but US allies South Korea and Japan welcomed Washington's move in the strongest possible terms. For its part, the UN is calling for the international community, and that includes China, to get more serious about human rights. Kwon So-ah reports.
Pyongyang has condemned the U.S. human rights sanctions on the regime, which even put North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on the blacklist. It's calling the move, quote, an open declaration of war, warning that it will close all diplomatic channels with the U.S. unless the blacklisting is revoked. In response, the U.S. is demanding the North stop its actions and rhetoric and said Washington will continue to pressure Pyongyang for its human rights violations. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Katina Adams said the steps the U.S. has taken are to, quote, promote accountability for North Korean officials responsible for serious human rights abuses and censorship. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Friday that North Korea should accept the international warnings, stressing that human rights are universal values of humanity.
North Korea's backlash won't halt efforts to bring an end to North Korea's human rights abuses. South Korea will closely watch the North's attitude in the future and will contribute to improving the North's human rights situation as well as inter-Korean relations.
While South Korea and Japan welcomed the U.S. sanctions, China did not, saying the North's human rights issues are not a threat to international peace and security. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called for comprehensive international action that included a message to Beijing.
He hopes that member states, including China, uses its influence to encourage the DPRK authorities to cooperate with international human rights mechanisms.
North Korea's human rights abuses are said to include forced labor, extrajudicial killings, systematic torture, and rape, a lot of which is committed in political prison camps. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now back here in South Korea, and the leaders and all the lawmakers of the ruling Saenuri Party are gathered at Cheongwadae for a luncheon meeting with President Park Geun-hye. Her message will likely include her continued drive for reform and restructuring and on bills aimed at boosting the economy to improve the livelihoods of the Korean people. The president had long stressed that the ruling party and the government must cooperate for state affairs to run smoothly and for her initiatives to bear fruit. This marks the first luncheon with the newly sworn-in lawmakers from the 20th National Assembly. Korea's finance minister has pledged to keep a tight rein on the country's foreign reserves coffers as overseas uncertainties have been heightened by Britain's recent decision to leave the European Union. Speaking at an economy-related ministers' meeting on Friday, Yoo Il-ho said Korea needs a stronger buffer to counteract external uncertainties, adding that the country's foreign reserves are its last resort. Korea's FX reserves were at the world's 7th largest as of the end of May, following countries like China, Japan and Switzerland. He added the government will take preemptive measures against market volatility while emphasising cooperation with other nations to minimise the negative impacts stemming from Brexit. And in its monthly report on economic conditions, Korea's finance ministry also cited Brexit as an uncertainty that could threaten the improvement of economic sentiment and the pace of job growth here in Korea. The ministry's so-called Green Book, released on Friday, says domestic demand is showing signs of recovery, while employment and production remain rather sluggish. Retail sales in May rebounded from a month earlier, rising 0.6% on month, thanks mainly to government measures cutting consumption tax and designating temporary public holidays. The figure dropped 0.5% from in April. Thanks mainly to the service sector, the number of jobs also rose on year in May, but the sluggish pace of job creation in the manufacturing sector left the overall number of new jobs added in the 200,000 level. Turning now to the ongoing investigation into Korea's 5th largest conglomerate, prosecutors in Seoul have slapped travel bans on key family members of Lotte Group as they widen their probe. The group's founder, Shin Gyok-ho, and chairman Shin Dong-bin have been banned from leaving Korea. This builds on the probe launched into the group about a month ago over allegations of embezzlement and slush funds. With that, the investigation is expected to pick up steam as only key executives of Lotte Group have been banned from leaving the country until now. On Thursday, prosecutors arrested a family member for the first time. Shin Yo-ja, the head of the Lotte Foundation, was detained on charges of embezzlement and receiving kickbacks. Now, Taiwan is on alert as Typhoon Nepartak makes landfall on the island, forcing thousands of people to evacuate their homes. So far, 1 death and 1 injury have been reported. Lee Min-young has the latest.
Super Typhoon Nepartak is battering Taiwan, devastating parts of the island. The typhoon made landfall in Taiwan early Friday, about 15 kilometers south of the eastern city of Taitung, packing wind speeds of 240 kilometers an hour. The storm has been pounding the eastern coast with torrential rain and wind, sparking heavy rain alerts and grounding both ships and planes. More than 15,000 people have been evacuated, and damages have been reported as violent gusts of wind caused trees to fall and windows to shatter. Power outages have left 1,300 homes in the dark. The typhoon is expected to strike China on Saturday and make its way toward the Korean peninsula on Monday. Nepartak will lose some of its force by the time it passes Korea's east coast, but heavy rain and strong winds are still expected to lash the nation from Monday through Wednesday. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
Now, it looks like it could be a rather hot summer in the United States. A second fatal shooting of an African-American man in as many days by police officers has sparked outrage in the US. Mass protests are rising up across the country as we speak, as people challenge the justice system, which they say is racially biased. Oh Young has the details.
Public outrage is escalating in the United States, where another African-American man was shot to death by a police officer this week. 32-year-old Philando Castile had been pulled over for a broken taillight in Falcon Heights, Minnesota.
The police officer stopped us for a busted taillight that was not busted. They pulled us over on the side of the road, asked for license and registration. As he got back comfortable, the police took 4 or 5 shots into him for no reason. They took his life for no reason.
Blood oozing as he slumps back against the driver's seat, Castile's final moments were recorded and posted live on Facebook by his girlfriend. As the graphic video circulated, sparking grief and outrage at the second police shooting in as many days, following the killing of another black man, Alton Sterling, in Louisiana. Thousands have taken to the streets in protest across the country in Washington, D.C., New York, Philadelphia and Minnesota. More than 200 demonstrators gathered outside the house of Minnesota Governor Mark Dayton, who called on the Department of Justice to launch an investigation into the case, adding that a state-level probe had already begun. Speaking at a news conference in Warsaw, President Obama expressed his concerns about the recent tragedies and the underlying problem of racism in the country's justice system.
This is not just a black issue. It's not just a Hispanic issue. This is an American issue that we should all care about. All fair-minded people should be concerned. There are problems across our criminal justice system. There are biases, some conscious and unconscious, that have to be rooted out.
According to data from the Washington Post, more than 500 people have been shot and killed by police this year. Castile is estimated to be the 123rd African American among them to have met this fate. Oh Young, Arirang News.
Now, with David Cameron on his way out of 10 Downing Street, we now know that Britain's next Prime Minister will be a woman. In the second ballot of the Conservative Party's leadership race, Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom have emerged as the top 2 candidates. Park Jong-hong reports.
It's now official. Britain will be ushering in a female Prime Minister who will lead the country out of the European Union. The remaining candidates are Interior Minister Theresa May and Energy Minister Andrea Leadsom, who came out on top in the wake of the second ballot of Conservative Party lawmakers. In party primaries on Thursday, May won 199 votes to Leadsom's 84. Justice Secretary Michael Gove garnered a mere 46 votes and was eliminated from the race. Gove, along with former London Mayor Boris Johnson, had been one of the key campaigners for Britain leaving the EU. Theresa May is considered a Eurosceptic, although she supported the UK remaining in the EU during her campaign. But soon after the referendum, May made it unequivocally clear that there would be no turning back. Andrea Leadsom has been a Leave campaigner from the start, pitching huge opportunities for Britain after its divorce from the EU. Whoever wins the contest, the outcome means Britain will have its second female prime minister in 26 years, after the late Margaret Thatcher, who was in office from 1979 to 1990. The next step in choosing Britain's new prime minister involves 150,000 grassroots Conservative Party members nationwide casting their ballots. The result will be announced by September 9th. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
Now, a big announcement is expected today for fans of Korea's Olympic champion swimmer Park Tae-hwan. An international sports tribunal is set to conclude whether Park can compete at this summer's Rio Olympics after completing an 18-month ban for a doping violation. Kwon Jang-oh reports.
The Court of Arbitration for Sport is expected to give a final ruling on Friday on whether swimmer Tae-hwan will be allowed to compete in Rio. The international body had been expected to give their ruling on Thursday, but Park's lawyers were notified that the decision had been delayed by a day. The swimmer was banned for 18 months by the international swimming body FINA in 2014 for testing positive for testosterone. Though the suspension was completed earlier this year, the Korean Olympic Committee's own ruling for doping meant an additional 3-year ban. That rule was deemed unlawful by Seoul court last week, but the Court of Arbitration for Sport is set to make the final decision. The Korean Olympic Committee has also convened an emergency board meeting and is expected to make a quick decision after the ruling, as Friday is the last day for the South Korean national team roster to be decided. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
For the first time, scientists have created a synthetic stingray that's activated by light instead of electricity. The genetically engineered cells respond to light, enabling US-based researchers to turn the robot in any direction using pulses of light. Kim Hae-sung reports.
A coin-sized artificial stingray. Once stimulated by light, the stingray starts swimming. It moves without electricity since it's powered by light-activated muscle cells. The muscle cells are made of 200,000 heart cells harvested from rats and are genetically engineered to respond to light signals.
Once illuminated, the ion goes out and the muscle cells contract. When the light source is removed, the muscles relax. This contraction and relaxation makes the stingray move.
The 16mm long ray moves at a speed of 9 meters an hour and makes turns like a real fish. The Harvard University research team says their long-term goal is to incorporate neural cells and electronics into a robot, opening the possibility of developing a humanoid robot with human cells. The results of the study were published in Science magazine on Friday. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Well, those are stories we've been following on this Friday lunchtime here in Seoul. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.